Director of Administration. Good afternoon or good evening. This meeting of the Genesee County Board of Commissioners is called to order at 5:30. Mr. Freeman, would you call the roll?
Commissioner Lloyd, Commissioner Winfrey, here. Commissioner Getzinger, Commissioner Brown, here. Commissioner Avery, Commissioner Shoemaker, present. Commissioner Kuzinaw, here. Commissioner Wayhill,
here.
Commissioner Flewelling.
All right, let me mention that we have 3 excused absences. Commissioner Flewelling is at a conference for his other work. Commissioner Getzinger, I believe, is at a graduation ceremony for granddaughter or someone in his family. And I just received a text from Mr. Lloyd that he will not be able to make it tonight. I understand that Commissioner Avery is on his way and will join us while we're in progress. Couple of announcements. So this is, I know we have to do the public address, but let me frame this for folks that might be new to this format. So when we have our regular Board of Commissioners meetings, whether they're in committee or whether they are a full commission meeting where we have voting items and lots of resolutions, we are downstairs on the 2nd floor, which is the Bryant Nolden Auditorium, affectionately named after a former colleague. But we also have workshops or study sessions at least once a month. This happens to be one of those occasions where we're a little less formal, although I do call the meeting to order. By law, we have public comment so that the public can speak to us. But we use these workshops and these study sessions to really drill into what we believe are substantive, important issues where they require more than a simple 10 minutes or more than 15 minutes on an already packed agenda. And so the purpose of the workshops is conducive to things like the senior millage discussion, where we have a task force that's been meeting over time. The second half of tonight's meeting will be around budget discussions. We're always spending money, almost always through our resolutions that we adopt, but we're headed into budget season, and so we want the commission to have some level setting from our CFO and others about what kind of monies we have and what kind of monies we don't have, and some of the pressing priorities in terms of our budget. So those are the 2 halves of our workshop this evening. Reminder for those at the table, whether you're a county commissioner or eventually when we get to it, the members of the senior task force, if you wish to speak, this is not new to you because I know you've been meeting in this room, but make sure that you speak into the microphone and that you turn it on with the red so that we can hear you and that the audience at home, this is on YouTube, live as we go, and it'll also be available as a recording on the county's YouTube page. Last call for pizza. Those of you that want to eat, again, this is an informal meeting. We provided some dinner. There's Cottage Inn behind that wall. So please help yourselves. With that, I will ask for public address. We allow for 2 minutes, and we ask any individual that wants to address the Board of Commissioners to state their name and the location where they live, either in Genesee County or elsewhere. Do we have any public address tonight? Any public address this evening? One last call for public address. Public address is closed. Under communications, we have the 2 items that we are here primarily to discuss. The first one is 26-372. It's the Senior Services Task Force presentation recommendations report. I'm going to just frame this a little bit before I turn it over to, I believe am I giving it to the chair and vice chair initially? So just a reminder for the Board of Commissioners and members of the public, we back in, when was this? September of last year, adopted a resolution creating the Senior Services Task Force, and made up of 9 people appointed by 1 for each commissioner on the Genesee County Board of Commissioners. They were to look at, I'll read it so you can all, this is their charge. Will be created on a temporary 1-year basis to assess the needs of older adults 60 plus in Genesee County and to make non-binding recommendations to the Genesee County Board of Commissioners as to programmatic service and budgetary priorities for this special and important population. We did ask in this resolution that they present their findings in writing to us no later than June 1st, and they were presented last week, or at least should say they came into the board office last week, or were finalized, and then presentation in person and in public to the full Board of Commissioners no later than July 1st. That is what tonight's about. So you have met your requirements in terms of providing us with a report and recommendations. There's a lot more in here as to how they should function. Know that I'll just say that I've been watching most of your meetings, except for maybe the last one that you did. My congratulations and hats off to the members of the task force. Very conscientious approach, lots of great questions, and I think, lots of very thoughtful recommendations that'll come to us tonight. So with that, I will turn it over to Richard Richardson, who is the chair of the Senior Services Task Force, and I'll let you introduce the other members, including your vice chair.
Okay. Again, my name is Richard Richardson. I'm the chair. On behalf of the task force, I wish to thank the Board of Commissioners for allowing us to come and meet with you and discuss what we have concluded in terms of our findings of the task force. The other members of the task force who are present, please introduce yourself. We'll start with Sandra Murphy, who is the vice president or vice chairperson.
So there you go. You just heard who I am. Sandra Murphy, and I had the pleasure of serving as the vice chair, and I was appointed by Dale.
My name is Elizabeth Taylor, and I had the opportunity of being appointed by Charles Winfrey, whom I admire.
Lisa Gulliver, and I had the pleasure of being appointed by Marty for Commission 7.
My name is Russ Perkins, and I was selected by Sean Shoemaker, and I'm very happy to be able to help out.
We came together in October, sort of a unique group. It was my understanding that for approximately 10 years, there had not been any type of task force looking at senior services or any type of advisory. Again, we focused on, in the beginning at our mission, we set forth a set of goals and objectives trying to meet a mechanism and outline a mechanism meeting by meeting in which we could go through a process and identify what we felt were the current status of senior services in Genesee County, those needs that are currently being met, and needs and gaps in services. We have provided you with a copy of our final report. It's 267 pages. So if you have problems sleeping, it works better than a sleeping pill, and that's coming from a retired nurse stating that. What we're going to focus today primarily on is the smaller report, which is in front of you. And there's two major components that we would like to present. First component is that of the process which we used to try and understand the current level of services and needs and gaps of services for seniors in Genesee County. And then the second is a set of 9 non-binding recommendations that we formulated from each of the members of the task force. I'm going to begin with the first portion of it, and it's under data collection. We tried to look at a process in which we would collect both qualitative and quantitative data. And so we used a schedule in which we tried to designate each meeting that we would set forth a purpose. Our major approach to that was looking at, in terms of a population assessment, both in terms of needs and gaps of services. We began in October with an overview of current services that were being provided from the millage dollars in terms of the Office of Senior Services from Genesee County. Both at the October and the December meeting, the Director of Senior Services, Lynn Radulowski, gave us presentations in terms of the existing services and very detailed in the December meeting in terms of those services that are provided. In January, we invited Yoshika Aubert, who is the president and CEO of the Valley Agency on Aging, to present to us from the perspective of the Valley Agency on Aging's plan for senior services in this county. And secondly, the combination of both millage dollars and external dollars that they use in terms of grants to meet the types of services. So it was looking at both the blending of millage dollars and also grants and other resources in terms of the community that comes to the Valley Agency of Aging in terms of presenting the services that they have and the funding of those type of services. At our next meeting, we looked at senior needs, gaps, and trends. We invited the three entities. The first was the Greater Flint Health Coalition. They are a local-based entity that looks at health issues. One of the things which they have specific is age-friendly wellness councils that are held at various senior centers. The data which she presented had some quantitative, but it also brought a lot of qualitative. These councils in which she gathered this information talks about the lived experiences that seniors in our community experience on a daily basis in terms of the services which they need and trying to obtain those services, and also a big broader perspective in terms of health and healthcare in Genesee County, looking at the decrease of population of primary care physicians that are occurring in Genesee County and other issues surrounding health and health services. The next person that presented was from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and it's a national poll of health, age, and aging that looks at predominantly qualitative and quantitative data of services for nationally. They try to drill down and present to us some of the findings that are specific to the state of Michigan. And then the third was the Bureau of Aging, Community Living, and Support Services, which is part of the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and looking at senior needs, gaps, and trends that were occurring at a state level. At our March meeting, we invited stakeholders who are currently associated with the senior millage, and we requested from them input in terms of what they perceive as unmet needs, gaps in services, and issues surrounding the underserved senior population in Genesee County. At our April meeting, we took and created a set of formal recommendations as a task force, and we struggled with it, but we came up with a mechanism thanks to the Planning Commission's assistance in terms of trying to establish priorities. This was an issue that we couldn't wrap our head around in terms of how we were going to get to the point of prioritizing. And we talk about the recommendations. I think Sandra will talk a little bit more about how that prioritization occurred. And then at the May meeting, we finalized in terms of our recommendation and put forth the final report. We voted on that in terms of an email process. Each of these months, we looked at a process of moving forward, knowing that we had the end goal of presenting a document by June 1st and a presentation to the Board of Commissioners in terms of July 1st. So we were very aware and acutely moving forward in terms of trying to meet the deadline that had been established by the Board of Commissioners. Does anybody have any questions over the process in which we used? In the formal report, there is data from each of the presentations that was presented to us for you to review also.
I know the first slide, I think it was the first one after the introductory slide, had the list of commissioners from the Board of Commissioners, but also the people who were appointed. It's my understanding that not all appointees made it to the end, and I just thought I would mention that, so that's on the record. So some members of the task force started in earnest, but did not complete their service. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I think there was a variety of reasons. Some people were employed in a position in which it was during tax season. There was an accountant, which I totally can understand. Also, there was some changing of some of the memberships, and one of the people appointed had a loss in their family, lost their wife. So we tried to have flexibility. There were a core group, at least 6 to 7, that attended the majority of the meetings and were very dedicated in terms of this process.
Okay, so I want to, again, thank all of you for this opportunity. And it feels like while this may be done for us, it really is the beginning for you. There's a whole lot more that needs to be done, and I'm hopeful that we're going to provide you with some information, recommendations that will take the work further. And I just have to say, yeah, this could put you to sleep, but I want to show you what it was that we got. And I want to thank Elizabeth, because I remember distinctly at the very first meeting, she said, we can't look at this stuff, this little bitty stuff. We need the bigger printed. And we got bigger printed. And it was extremely helpful because we were able to see the mapping that was given to us was invaluable as to where certain services were being delivered in the county. I thought it was surprising to me, and there were times when I was able to put things together and overlap them to see where are senior centers and where are some of these services being delivered. So thank you, Elizabeth. I appreciated the recommendation, and you may need magnifying glasses to look at it here. So as Richard said, I'm going to talk to you about the recommendations that we made. And I want to start with this overall one because for me, this is key. And if you don't remember anything else from this presentation, I hope that this is what you're going to take to the next level in your conversations. We heard the words collaboration and cooperation over and over and over again, and feel that that is a missing piece. I'm not trying to be critical. We're not pointing a finger at anybody, but it is a missing piece in terms of service delivery and good use of the dollars. I want to point out to you on page 11 of the report, you're going to find the mission statement for the department. And it says that, it's not up there in a slide, the Senior Services is dedicated to improving the health, safety, and quality of life for seniors in Genesee County. The department oversees the distribution of senior millage dollars approved by the commissioners to area senior centers and contracted senior services providers to ensure quality services. The words cooperation and collaboration and all of those things that help us further extend our resources is not in here. And so, and because it's been so long, I'm sure, from when this was developed, it's time to rethink this. So that is why this is the overall recommendation that we're making. And so I want to talk about the recommendation process. Richard told you that each of us went ahead and made recommendations. We had a form. Under his guidance, we decided to do high, medium, and low priorities. And so on an afternoon, we met in a room and we were each given 10 dots. And it was a nominal group process. So for those of you who might not know what that is, it means that we would individually use our 10 dots, put those dots on whatever recommendations we felt were important. And if I felt one was more important than another, I could put 5 to 7 to 10 dots on one. So that's why you're going to see numbers here that exceed the number of people on the task force, because some people did that. And that's okay to do, because it emphasizes how important that recommendation was. So if you look at that, the one that came to the very top was related to the MSU Senior Assessment Research Study. Richard and I have had an opportunity to look over what is proposed, and I just want to say that I think, yes, this is definitely going to be a useful tool for making future decisions. But you can see that that got a vote of 9 dots. And none of us know who did what dots. At least I don't think we do, right? The increasing of the millage funds, it goes without saying, whenever people are saying we don't have enough money, then you talk about whether or not there's a possibility of getting more money, and unless you ask, you're never going to get. So that was in there and got 7 dots. Increase millage funding, create a marketing plan for the millage. This plan would utilize the data from MSU. I know in the course of the time from when I was appointed till today, I never missed an opportunity to ask people in my church community, my neighborhood, in my women's book club, what do you know about the senior millage? And to their credit, the senior centers come up on top. Everybody knows about a senior center. They may know about their individual one, or like Richard, who I think is a unicorn, has gone to many senior centers. They know about their local senior center, which is a good thing. But many people do not understand the breadth of the services that are also the substantial part of that budget. And when I would share that with them, it was like, well, how do I find out about that? I've got a mother who is getting meals at the senior center. I don't like the fact that she eats margarine on those meals, but how else can I find other services about her? So I think that this is one that's very important, understanding in the public what the millage funds and supports and how seniors can have access to that is very important. And then provide funding for case managers for all senior centers. Again, the idea of coordinating services for seniors in a case management style would be very beneficial. Now, one of the things that we all noted was that there were no wait lists for senior centers. It's an important point. We did see in the presentation that there are wait lists for certain services. There are no wait lists for senior centers. Now, that doesn't mean they can't provide for more people in their community. We know that. And various members of senior centers talked with us about how they go about doing that. We actually looked at the budgets, were given information about the budgets for senior centers for the 25-26 fiscal year. And I was amazed at how creative some of these senior centers are in terms of being able to supplement what they get from the millage to continue to do the services in their community. I mean, one of the senior centers makes a boatload of money on trips. I want to know how they do that. Other senior centers don't do any trips. They all reflect what their community needs and wants. There's no doubt about that. But senior centers are nonprofits. Some of them are municipalities in terms of their boards of directors are appointed. They're not elected from their members. And I don't know what kind of support they get to build their budgets outside of the senior millage allocation. So that's something to think about in terms of providing more additional support to senior centers. The task force recommended in our May meeting that we wanted to move 2 items that had previously been in the medium priorities up to high priorities. And that is why you see there those 2 items. Having a development department that has grant writers, grant researchers, available not only for the senior millage services, but for the entire county. I mean, I'm shocked that this county does not have that kind of a department. And I wonder how many missed opportunities there have been to leverage state and federal dollars because we don't have somebody whose sole job it is to keep track of that kind of stuff.
So
But-
can I interrupt just for a
Yeah,
second?
go ahead, Elizabeth.
So while we're looking at what we voted for, I really was very serious about having grant writers for senior programming because that's what our task force was, and it was very heavy. I didn't say the county. I don't remember that was what, I mean, I think you should have, you know, as commissioners. But I really think we need an emphasis on we being seniors, having that for the senior programming for seniors. I really want to emphasize. Thank you. for
Yeah,
letting
sure.
me interrupt.
Yep, no problem. Then the other bullet that we brought up talks about expanding programs for homebound seniors. Again, we felt, as you can see, it got no dots. But as a group, when we talked about it, we realized that it really should have a high priority, and we only had 10 dots. So that's why we moved that one up. Medium.
Before you move to the medium, I'd like to put my personal perspective in terms of this high priority. And the one was in terms of allocation of increased funding for senior centers. I was surprised that was during the presentation that the director of senior services said that when the millage distribution was established, that the commissioners at that point in time allocated only 33.3% of the millage funding to go to senior centers. And that has basically very small movement on it in terms of right now it's somewhere between 33.3% and 35% of the funding of the millage goes to senior services. Granted that senior services or centers are predominantly well individuals. It serves a distinct purpose in terms of socialization. It helps in terms of decrease of depression. It creates new communities for seniors who have nobody in their life. They become friends with a new group of people. And so there is value to it. And also in terms of looking at senior centers, if you look at the number of individuals in terms of this community that the tax dollars touch, it was reported that roughly on an annual basis that it's about 14,500 seniors participate in terms of senior centers. I repeatedly said in our task force meeting that we need to reflect on the fact that the task force, one of the primary reasons that it was created was to look at increased funding for senior centers. And so that recommendation is there. It's a recommendation that I personally brought forward. There's no distinct number in terms of what that should be. I think that discussion, because it's an unbinding recommendation, I think that's a discussion that the commissioners themselves need to have in terms of what that funding should be. But keep in mind that that 33.3% or 35% has not increased, but the cost of delivering services has increased. We talked about in terms of, some sort of incentive or factor that may, be allocated in terms of a cost of operation of how senior centers deliver services, that again, those costs have drastically increased since the conception of the senior millage in the original formula for allocation to senior centers.
Okay.
Sandra, can I also make a comment?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So tagging on to both yours and Richard's comments from earlier, as you mentioned, when you asked folks, what they knew about the senior millage, their number one thing was senior centers. Richard said, senior centers do this, do that. They also provide a service because, like you said, if someone doesn't know where to go, they're going to call their senior center or they're going to go into their senior center. A lot of senior centers are the ones that refer people to the other services, the senior services within Genesee County. Some of the senior services have loan closets. So if someone, is hurt or injured, needs a walker, needs a stool for the restroom or a chair for their shower, a lot of our senior centers provide, those services as well. I wish it was all sunshine and rainbows and, trips and playing cards every day. But in reality, that's also what our senior centers do every day. So I just wanted to make that point as well.
And the prime example of one of the problem solvings that a senior center does occurred in my own. And an elderly person came in and they could no longer fund their house and insurance. It was out of their reach. So the director worked with them and found another insurance company that would provide the house insurance at a cheaper rate. The person canceled her original plan. She accepted the new plan, made a payment on it, and only to find out 30 days later that the insurance company sent out an inspector and deemed that the roof needed to be replaced. So she saved a few $1,000s by changing insurance plans, but then was faced with, a $35,000 cost of replacing the roof. So the senior director is the one that tapped out into the community and found the resource that ended up with that individual getting a new roof, free of charge in terms of, and those are issues that, senior directors and senior center staff encounter on a daily basis in terms of trying to provide services to people. It's not just eating a meal or playing cards or dominoes.
Thank you. Let me just, go ahead, Russ. Go ahead, please.
Another aspect of the senior centers that has not been tapped. I spent probably 15 years not involved at all with senior centers. I really didn't know what they did. I was unaware. And yet, during those 15 years, I had relatively good health, opportunities to do and help the community and use my experience. And I'm thinking of, we have people similar to me that don't retire and immediately become needy. They retire and they're full of energy and life and experience and willingness to do things. And that group of people can be an immense source of solving our problems. They can be helpful in helping the seniors that are having health problems. They're a tremendous source of it. And then, so I'm thinking of the senior centers as being in the future, so I would recommend even more money, that they go out and seek people to help with the community's problems and let new retirees know what's available, know they can serve the community and not give their whole time to it. They can pick and choose, but they've got skills, they got knowledge, they got experience. They like to work with young people, their grandparents. They can help us solve many of the problems in the community if we just become and let them know and make awareness a aspect of the senior centers.
So I was going to do a quick check-in. So we finished the high priority section. Commission colleagues, do you want Sandra just to continue and go through medium and low before we engage with questions? That's the plan, I think. Is that okay? All right. Please proceed, Sandra.
Okay. But I've got to say this. What you heard is, I think, the result of the way the structure has been set up for the last 20 years with the millage, in that there's a finite pool of money. And we have, as Elizabeth tells us frequently, we have an aging population that is living longer. And so what we don't have is strategic and equitable funding mechanisms and no strategy for that. We keep doing the same thing over and over and over. And so here we are. When I read the MSU research proposal, I was happy to see that in there is a goal to be able to look at how to do research best practice models for how this kind of funding is delivered, not throughout only Michigan, but probably throughout the country. Because what happens when we have what we've got going on right now, where a certain group of people have a percentage of the pie and the other doesn't, is you pit people against each other. And this is not apples to oranges. Our community needs all of this, all of it. And it all needs to be funded at a higher level. So if we take that mindset, I think then we can hopefully make the best decisions in this interim before we have another millage vote. The medium priorities are fairly clear. They're down here. You can see they got anywhere from 3 to 4 votes. I do think it's important, the last one on this page about you're having an orientation. You all need to keep abreast of what's happening with the seniors because we're the ones that vote. We just do. And we're the ones that, again, are growing in population and we're living longer in your district. So I would say you need to keep abreast of what's happening by having your director of senior services come and present to you and perhaps visit your own senior center. The low priorities, many of them did not even get one. Again, we were limited to 10. That doesn't mean that they aren't important. It just meant that we didn't have enough dots. And you can certainly take a look at them. Some of them get down into what we would refer to as the weeds, but they were recommendations that were brought forward. There was a consistent need indicated for transportation coordination. Transportation came up in various places as a real need. People are getting left places, they're not getting picked up on time. So there may be, and what I really liked was there was a recommendation made about creating action teams. It may be that to go toward a model of cooperation and collaboration, that the Department of Senior Services would pick one particular area and formulate a plan for how can we bring the principal parties together, the stakeholders around this particular issue, and work out something that's going to be for the benefit of everyone. And transportation may be that one. And then lastly, at the bottom, we did remove one recommendation about limiting the number of senior centers within a certain mileage area. So with that, I'm done.
All right, thank you, Sandra.
I would just like to say one thing. We talk about collaboration and everything, about interagency, but then we refer to the senior citizen in your area. And I think we have to learn to think that all senior citizen centers belong to everyone. I mean, we say one thing, but we really don't say the same thing. And I really think we should be watching that ourselves, because I think I can go to any senior citizen. I still am able to drive at my age, 83 in a couple of months. But everybody my age isn't able to do that. But I just think it's important to emphasize that all centers belong to everyone. They're not geographical. And I think that's really deep in here, is that senior citizen centers are geographical.
I think that's one of the reasons why I attend so many. It's because of unique services that each senior center has. And I am part of the younger group too.
I'm going to open it up to the Board of Commissioners for questions, comments, engaging in some dialogue over what you've heard. If people want to engage. Commissioner Brown. Oh, your microphone, Dr. Brown.
I just had a quick question about the reinstating the RAMP program. When did the RAMP program disappear?
Lynn, do you want to comment on that? Or
I'll invite Lynn Radzalowski to approach and give us some information. I'll say I want to recognize Lynn as our Director of Senior Services here at the county, and it was mentioned that you presented, I think, at the first 2 meetings, maybe at least the first one, right? And I watched those online, and I felt you were masterful in terms of your knowledge of what every provider, whether it's a senior center or another entity, does with the senior millage dollars. I mean, truly, truly impressed. So that's a compliment, but we also have a question about the RAMP program. So please.
To the group, we had the RAMP program for approximately 4 years. This is the first year we are decided it was not to be funded. There were a number of reasons why. We were not having the best of communications with our subcontractor. A lot of the ramps were big and wonderful. They actually probably were worth more than the house that it was being attached to. We were under the understanding that there was going to be temporary ramps for those seniors that are returning home from, let's say, a fall or something, that they only needed the temporary ramp for a month or so and then be removed. But every single home that was recommended received a permanent ramp. And those ramps ranged anywhere from $4,000 to $10,000 each. The screening process through the organization that we used wasn't the best also in communication. So when it came down to looking at programs that we wanted to fund and also that we needed to eliminate, we started to looking at what I like to call the one and dones. So these seniors received their ramp, the ramp is staying with them, but the decision was to not move on with this contract. We also did not receive some good responses when the RFP process went out. I will be happy to say that during this whole process, times have changed. We do have an organization that's well established with the senior millage that is starting a RAMP program. We have a response from them, and that is a possibility in the upcoming budget season to bring back the RAMP program for this next fiscal year.
I'd like to add on a personal note that I have had family members that were wheelchair bound, and you know, I totally understand in terms of the problematic of trying to run a program, because when I've looked at getting a ramp for a family member, it was $7,000 for the ramp. You know, with the cost of lumber and everything going up, the other issue in terms of what Lynn has stated, you know, sometimes the ramps cost more than what the homes are actually worth. So I think we need to look at that particular issue. One of the things which I tried as chair of the task force was to have the task force look at issues in terms of the risk that was involved. And to me, this was a proposal that I set forth, but it was, to me, a low volume, but a very high risk. If you got somebody who is wheelchair bound or cannot ambulate on their own and the house catches on fire, it's not an issue of, you know, what's going to happen. It's an issue of life and death. And I think that in itself is the highest of risk of all of these recommendations.
Commissioner Winfrey.
Lynn, are the aluminum ramps cost effective, or are they just used on a temporary basis?
The aluminum ramps are temporary. So let's say somebody has a fall, they're in a rehab facility for a couple months, and they're coming home to continue their rehab, but there's not a permanent need for that ramp. They're not going to be wheelchair bound for the rest of their life. That ramp can then be removed and used at another home.
So they're not good for permanent.
Permanent, we would want the wood and the wonderful structures that have been built. But if it's for a temporary basis, we want to reuse those ramps, because it's very much more cost effective to reuse an aluminum $3,000 ramp at multiple homes.
Thank you.
Other commissioners? All right, well, do you want the floor, Sean? Please.
I'd just like to say, number one, thank you for your dedication to this project. Thank you for your time to the group that showed up and put the work in. There's a lot of work into this, and we appreciate it. And I don't know if I'll read all 200 and some pages, but I will definitely read through it about 4 a.m. when I need to go back to sleep. So, but I do appreciate that. I know the board does. We've got a lot of big decisions. There's always the question of funding when it comes to anything, and unfortunately, there's only limited resources all over. So we appreciate it. To our board, we've got a lot to think about, a lot to work on moving forward. We'll probably have to have another workshop type session to discuss how we move forward from there. But thank you to you all that showed up, put the work in. We appreciate it.
So I'll ask a couple questions and try to generate a little dialogue, I think. So I'm looking at the page, high priority recommendations. I guess a clarifying question. Marketing plan and marketing of the services is actually in this section, but it's in some of the lower priority sections as well. And I'm kind of wondering what the difference is, or if it might be essentially the same thing. So it's the third one down, right? Marketing plan for the millage. Is it marketing the millage, or is it marketing all the services that the different entities that receive millage funding provide?
That one was speaking directly to the idea of when the millage comes up,
I see.
and that the data that's collected from MSU might help with people better understanding what the need is.
Got it. Okay. And the other ones that are down below are more about the individual services. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Tell me a little more about the case manager recommendation. I want to say that I recollect that I don't know if it's VAAA or another entity that receives millage dollars, receives those for that purpose. And I may be wrong and not recollecting it properly, but I thought we were funding case management for seniors. I wonder, Lynn, would you comment on that and then have the members of the task force talk about, maybe drill down on that a little more?
Yes, so we contract with VAAA for intake, referral, and case management services. These services are specifically for the homebound seniors that receive in-home personal care and chore service, respite services, home-delivered meal service. What I believe this recommendation is about is putting case managers in the actual senior centers, similar to the model of legal services, where there's an attorney, that there's appointments are made in the center, the directors schedule those, and those seniors can meet one-on-one in a private setting at the senior center with more in-depth, I guess, help than your basic, here's a phone number, here's a resource directory, really diving deep into it. We think this is a wonderful idea. It's going to take a little bit more talking to, as our office has already reached out to the senior center directors asking, what are your thoughts about a case manager in your center? What are your thoughts about versus a social worker in your center? And we're getting feedback from each of them that are participating to somehow put together, because if this were to come to fruition, we would have to put out for bid. And we want to make sure that we would be bidding out the correct service tailored to those centers.
Thank you for that explanation. That's very helpful. And then the second half of this chart, so the way I interpret the two that were later added into the high priority category, you all initially ranked them, looks like the first one about the development department got 4 dots, is that right? And then the second item on your first go around had 0 dots, but then you reconvened and had just a general discussion about where everything landed and decided that these two were important enough to move up. Is that a fair summary? So my interest is mostly on the one that got 0 the first time around. The way I read this, it's really talking directly about the homebound seniors. So these are seniors that rarely, if ever, are able to, I assume, use a senior center. Maybe sometimes they're able to, but primarily they're being served by the other providers that are part of our pool that get the other resources. So, VAAA and legal services and G-Card and Family Service Agency, et cetera. And I'm certainly not naming them all. But I'd like to hear more about your evolution in thinking about going from zero support, essentially. And I realize that you got only so many dots, but maybe talk to us about what that conversation was like. I'll just end with this on the question. I remember, excuse me, when you all invited the providers to come to the microphone, essentially, and say, you gave them 2 minutes or 3 minutes, whatever it was, talk about your unmet needs. I watched that meeting, and I remember that there were a fair amount of waiting lists or unmet needs at places that are trying to provide transportation or in-home support, those kinds of things, which I think is captured by that. So I don't, any of you can speak to it, or more than one, but how did your thinking evolve on that?
Well, I'll start, and then I'm going to pitch it to Elizabeth. Yes, it got 0. And at the meeting where we were putting these dots up, not all of our members were present. At the subsequent meeting, when we were prioritizing them, Elizabeth in particular was present and was able to speak very eloquently to this one. The key word here is expand. The expansion is related to the wait lists that we saw and that we heard. So we debated at that meeting whether or not we should just give Elizabeth dots and let her go about and put up her dots. And the decision was no, we wouldn't do that. We would just come to consensus as we were having the conversation. And so then we all agreed that we would move this up.
And to my defense, well, I didn't come with dots, but I did come realizing that we had not, as a group, done much for those that were not able to be at the centers. And I'm just moments away from being that person. So I need help in that area. In fact, I tried to adopt one of the service providers at one of the commission meetings who does lawn and snow, because he told me they have a wait list also. But it's such a serious issue, those that aren't being serviced in a building. And that could be any of us tomorrow. As I say repeatedly, drum beating, everybody in this room may be eligible to attend a senior citizen service. And I'm not sure, does it need to be sexier to get more people to participate while we're able to participate, or are we retiring and not staying active? And I contribute my stability and endurance for being active, but everybody doesn't have that. But I have been and sat with friends and family and loved ones who can't get out. And when I realized that that had not reached the dots, and that was my first empathetic feeling. I just felt like, who's looking out for me? I'm not here to talk for myself. And we're just kidding ourselves if we don't all realize that that's happening to those of us that are sitting around this table for sure. I mean, I think maybe, I could be speaking out of turn, but maybe 99% of us are able or eligible to participate at a center. And if we're not, I want to know why not? What is it that we need to provide or let seniors know that are available for me in Flint, in Genesee County, that I can go to stay independent, to not be dependent on always calling not always calling your office to say, I need help to do this, or at my center, I need help to do that. I need help to be there. I need it readily available. And it's not. It's not readily available for seniors. Some seniors don't even know that we have the service. So what do we need to be as sexy as the new YMCA building downtown, where people are paying? We're already paying. Everybody's already paying taxes to participate, which is what took me to the next point, is that we need a grant writer dedicated to seniors. How are we touching our seniors? How do we touch them? It doesn't always have to come from the millage. It also can come. That's why I was also excited about Dr. Rick doing the research out of Michigan State. I really think they do a great program, and we're not utilizing that service enough. So that's my response to.
In terms of wait lists, I'd like to add that I think the task force tried to do an exceptional job of putting together recommendations, but some of the issues need to be driven deeper in terms of what is the root causes of the wait list. And it's not just purely money, it's the availability of finding qualified personnel in some of the roles that, in terms of case management, in terms of direct care providers, those sort of things. A lot of times the issue is not only training, but trying to keep people in terms of longevity. Once they become trained, then they may find a job in which they can get an increase in earnings at a different facility, so they automatically will leave shortly after they've been trained. And an agency has, basically created an individual now who is a free agent at their expense.
Commissioner Brown.
I would just echo that sentiment, because that was what you said, exactly what I was thinking. And I was going to ask the question, what if we had an endless pot of money? Does that mean we would have an endless, list of contractors to be able to build ramps, to be able to shovel snow, to be able to mow lawns? Ever since I've been a commissioner, I have known that there's always a wait list for shoveling snow and mowing lawns for seniors. That's been an ongoing problem. So, let me just back up and just say that the overall recommendation, I think, is spot on. Thank you for stating that in black and white. What I'd like to do, though, with that recommendation is see it actualized, give it some time to actualize this overall recommendation, and see how that works out for a year or so. And because I agree with Commissioner Wayhill's assessment that Lynn is a high-performing department head. She knows what she's doing. She's very well-versed, and she's been doing this a while, so she knows the ins and outs of everything. I wonder if we empowered her to enact this overall recommendation, how would it solve some of the recommendations that are baked into your report already? So that's why I want to give her some leverage to do the things that you have recommended up front in your report. The other thing that occurred to me is that I really am delighted that that one of your top recommendations is to have Michigan State University do this research, because I'm not sure in the methodology we actually heard from homebound people to the extent that we need to hear from those homebound people. And so I really want to do some more outreach to hear their narratives. I'm really excited about it being, a mixed method study. And so I want to give that some time to play out as well. But overall, what I hear in these recommendations, especially the high priority ones, is that we need to increase funding because it hasn't been increased in so many years. Are you saying to us that you're recommending we go to taxpayers and ask them to pay more money for the senior millage? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think it says in there, increase the millage. Yeah. Now, property values being what they are, who knows, right? 8-9 years from now, what it's going to look like. But that to me would be the number one. And then supplementing, I was very impressed, as I said earlier, with the budgets that I saw with senior centers. Those are creative people who are putting together resources that are in their community. Some of them are writing grants to their local community foundation and to family foundations. Some of them are working with their municipalities, and then they're doing other events. All of that work, as having spent my career in nonprofit management, means that that administrator doesn't have time to do the case management, social work kind of services that could walk into the door at any given time. So you can't expect people whose plate is already very full, and Lynn would be a part of that, to then be able to focus in a meaningful way on better collaboration, cooperation. But yeah, I think, I'm going to be an advocate and disciple for senior services here on out. I cannot not be. It's what I'm taking away from this. And I'm hoping that all of us are spreading the word about it because I want that millage to pass. If you think about right now, what is it that in the arts people are doing right now to promote that millage? I hear about it all the time, everywhere I go, right? That's never been the case with this millage. So we got to step it up.
So let me interject for a minute because I think Russ's comment earlier about tapping into the wisdom of this rich population. Folks who retire, they have this window between when they retire and they really, really retire. Yeah. So I'm in that window right now because I've been retired for 3 years. And I used to remember a group of seniors, they were called Seniors Fourscore and More or something, a group that provided professional services to agencies. What was it? It was something like that, but it had a different name. It had SCORE in there somewhere. But anyway, if that group doesn't exist anymore, it needs to be elevated or recreated or whatever. Because I believe because I have lots of friends who have retired, and trust me, I try to get them engaged in doing something to help the community, and all they want to do is play golf. All they want to do is have fun. All they want to do is travel. They don't want to give back. They may want to, but no, they really don't want to. So how do we tap into those people and try to figure out how they can help with some of these recommendations and leverage the finite pot of money that we have right now? I think that we need to get to the root cause of some of these issues, like the communication blockage, failure. If we can fix some of those things, then I think I want to give us a year or two to try to fix some of those things before, but at the same time, put in a marketing plan, start developing a marketing plan to go to the voters. And really, I don't think that it needs to be all in black and white and thought out well. I think it can start now, just by word of mouth, with all of you now that you're all educated. You're disciples now. I am charging you as disciples. And you can start and spread the word, especially to those people who are homebound. Like Elizabeth said, there are countless people who are at home right now who don't have the benefit of getting to senior centers. So I'll stop there, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Dr. Brown. Many years ago, I got you, Marty. Let me just make one little comment. So many years ago, there was the Flint Executive Service Corps, which was a group of retirees, mostly General Motors folks, who helped with strategic planning and things for nonprofits. A little bit different in terms of their focus than what I think you're saying, but we certainly want people to volunteer in their community and use their minds and their skills that they've developed over years. Commissioner Cousineau, you have the floor.
Is it on?
It's on.
Okay, beautiful. For some time now, I've qualified, age-wise, to go to a senior citizen center. I could care less. I know.
Shame on you.
It's not my thing. Why? I'm busy in life. I'm busy. I'm enjoying life. No, I am not. I'm having
You're one
fun.
of the fortunate because you have a social network. There's people, when I retired, I lost the people that I worked with. They moved out of state and that. I went to a senior center. I met a new group of people. They're part of my community, and I consider many of them part of my family. And that's what that senior center gave to me, is a new group of people to interact, a new social network to be part of my life and to enrich my life.
Let's allow Commissioner Cousineau to complete.
Make that statement to create an argument. I'm stating me, and me only. And what I'm saying is not everybody wants to go and spend their days at the Senior Citizen Center. They're like me. they're out doing things, playing golf, whatever.
I
comes a
challenge you to go visit a senior center and see what actually occurs in a senior
I'm
center.
not here to argue.
Okay.
I'm done.
I would just like to add, though, in response to that, because I only go to my senior center, I mean, occasionally. No, not even for a class. I just don't. I go other places. Now, that doesn't mean I don't support it, but the greater good is what I continually think about. A community needs to provide a safety net. Are we done? A safety net for everybody. And while I may not need that right now, I am willing to pay the tax to be able to have my neighbor go do that. I've lived in Detroit and Lansing, Wayne County and Ingham County. And when I moved to Genesee County, I told my friends, this is the only county I've ever lived in that taxes itself so much for quality of life issues. That's not true in a lot of other geographic areas. And if you've never lived somewhere else, you're never going to know that. So, you know, we're blessed and we're generous. This is a very generous community. My work at the Community Foundation, I saw it over and over and over again. So I would just say, okay, I don't go that often to my senior center, but I want to make sure that Elizabeth and Richard and Marty, when he wants to do it, can go. Because they're vital to the well-being, overall well-being of our community and our citizens. And as Elizabeth always says, you know, we're aging more and we're living longer. And I want to be one of those people that lives really long. So,
Do we have other commissioners that want to make a comment or a question? Before I get to Commissioner Getzinger, who is faithfully watching in real time and has sent us a question. And I think this is posed to members of the task force to respond to. I have not heard much about the senior service providers. Would it make sense for the centers, meaning the senior centers, to be the hub and providers work through the centers? From Gary. So reaction to that.
I think the mechanism which we have in place in terms of the Valley Agency on Aging, in terms of their intake and assessment and their case management, is a very good system. It's functioning. You know, everything can use tweaks in terms of improvement, process improvement. But I think it's a good system that we have in this county. It models after several other agencies at that same level in the state. And I personally don't see that as a mechanism. I think
it could be added to the MSU research study. I mean, my hope would be that that research study is going to look at strategically, again, best practices across Michigan and our region as to how service delivery can be more effective, cost-effective, more impactful, reach more people. And there may be in some communities where a senior center would be the logical place for people to go, and then in other communities it would not. So it's a good question.
And in terms of the research study, Dr. Brown, I agree with you that it needs to be mixed methodology, but I also believe that the design should include a community participatory research approach to it, in which members of the community are not only being interviewed, but they're part of that task force that is moving that research forward, that, you know, they're shaping the benefits of that research project.
So,
What Dr. Rick was doing. I think that's what they do here at Michigan State.
So I've got Commissioner Brown and Russ. Commissioner Brown, would you like to?
yeah, I'll be real quick. I think as they do the study, I want us to be careful about best practices around the state, around the country, because best practices in one place may not be best for us. I prefer to say promising practices because Genesee County is unique. We are a generous community, and there are lots of other mechanisms in place that are not adequately utilized. So I want to put that out there first. And then I heard you say the word collaboration. You've heard the word collaboration. I wonder to what extent we have collaborated or even asked MTA about their transportation plan. They have a brand new transportation plan that they're rolling out as we speak. And I think that a lot of the issues that are in this 200-page report, maybe they can be communicated to MTA and we can collaborate with them on using that existing structure. Thank you.
Mr. Perkins.
Yeah, I'd like to see some things continuing afterwards. I don't think that we're going to be able to get and solve things today. I think continuous improvement, continuous working on the problem, getting feedback, and people working on it. We, as a group, only met for a few hours, basically. After we had gotten a lot of information, many of our first sessions were involved with that. The last session, when we presented our ideas, we only had a couple hours, and we didn't even have the chance to get to. I brought ideas in, and we didn't get the chance to discuss them. And so I think that a mechanism, a way to look at what's going on, try something, doesn't work, you make adjustments, continuous improvement process. One of the things that I think strongly is we can have community, not just us, not just seniors. We can have participation by the entire community in teams that do services for seniors, homebound, if we sit down and look at the possibilities. There have been many cases that I've seen with there's one person going to a house to service somebody. The older person is there alone. And the person that is there to service them may not communicate well, may not be able to understand, may not have experience. You need a group of people sometimes going to the house, at least the first time, with multiple skills, insight, so they can look around and see problems, identify problems, and make a plan to deal with them. Instead of just hit and miss whenever somebody complains. So that expand programs for homebound, I think that requires a team approach. But we don't want to talk about it now, but that's something I would look at as if we go on, if we allow time to continue. Not everybody, but develop some type of continuing monitoring, continuous improvement process.
Thank you, Russ. I want to thank the staff that was primary support for the task force. Before I omit that, Derek Bradshaw and Gwyneth Kosselman from our metropolitan planning area. Give them a round of applause, if you would. So we're going to move on to our next item. I will refer to what Commissioner Shoemaker alluded to, that this is sort of just the beginning of our discussion as a Board of Commissioners around this topic. One of the reasons why we timed it the way we did in terms of the report and recommendations this month, or at least before July 1st, is so we could incorporate this thinking into the budget process, where we will obviously have the Senior Services Office presenting us with recommendations about how to spend those finite millage dollars. So we'll take a 5-minute break, and those of you that were here just for the senior millage, we hope that you will stay for a rousing discussion of the county's budget difficulties, but you're welcome to exit if you wish to do so at this time.
We're going to do this next. We're going to do this next. You can go if you want to go.
I wanted to show you something on the back. Back here, we had pages we passed in with our proposal.
Yep.
Everyone, we're going to reconvene, so if you would take your seats, please. Yeah, and so the second half of our study session today is devoted to, it's called budget update, but I don't know if it's so much a budget update as it is trying to figure out, well, let me back up, and then I'm going to throw it to Mr. Freeman, who will throw it to Crystal. We've had a fair number of discussions recently as a commission on individual resolutions about funding things, limited amount of money by definition, concerns about our fiscal stability, and obviously that's our number 2 priority that we adopted. So one thing that I asked Josh and Crystal to work on was a presentation so that we can kind of level set the full commission all at once, going into the budget season where we have to spend money, talk about spending money, and then vote on it eventually, so they could share with us what the revenues look like, some projections if we can do our best to do that, anticipated expenses that we will have, things that are sitting out there that could be problematic and challenging, like the prosecutor's budget, for example, the ARPA dollars that we're going to be losing or expending fully by the end of this calendar year. The list goes on. So they have taken up the task, and that will be the second half of our meeting. I'm going to ask Mr. Freeman to say a few words, and then our CFO will share her presentation.
Yeah, so as I understood, the charge from the chair and the vice chair was, let's get a 50,000-foot view of where we are. Let's look over the next 5 years, I think is what we ended up settling on. And what are those pressure points within that time period that we need to be aware of as you're being asked to make decisions on positions, on programs, and then just, what you see as your budget priorities based on the adopted. So Crystal has gone through, and we're trying to be very visual in this presentation. A red down arrow is bad, and a green up arrow is good. So she's going to walk through the meat of this. You'll get a lay of the land of where we're at, and then after that, we've got kind of some actual budget books that look at, okay, if we stay status quo moving forward, what do we expect the budget to look like in the next 5 years? We also have some things hanging out there, right, that you've had requests that we said, no, we're not going to do anything with this until budget season. If those are approved, what does that look like for the upcoming year and then 4 or 5 years down the road as well? So you can get a picture of current state and future state depending on how you decide to move forward. So, Crystal.
We're going to go over some assumptions and some key points first. I feel like if we pass out numbers, a lot of times eyeballs go to the page and start reading, and we don't necessarily get to focus on what the key points are. But before we get to the numbers, obviously, if I could predict what would happen in the next year to 4 or 5 years out, that would be great. These numbers will change even for fiscal year 27 between now and when we adopt in August, probably 3 or 4 times. As we get updated information from the state, from the federal government, just from departments, so let's say medical examiner's office has a county that's going to no longer participate in their service. There's things that go into that that change all the time, and that's why you see amendments throughout the year. So we did put together our best estimate as of right now. The payroll information that we included in here for fiscal year 27 is what's in the system right now. That has not been reviewed by my office, and the departments are also working on their budgets this week, so we'll have better information next week when we start reviewing that. So property taxes, we have been in a good place the last few years, but as you know, Proposal A limits how high we can increase those taxes every year. It's the lesser of 5% or inflation. If homes are sold, they can be uncapped. And if we have new development, the new tax revenue comes into our county. So we've been very lucky over the last several years. Our increases have averaged from 5.28% up to about 7%. So for our assumptions that you're going to see today, we used 5.28% as an estimate. Obviously, we don't want to project out at 7% knowing that it can fluctuate, but the lowest it's been in the last few years is just about 5.28%.
Crystal, if I could just jump in on that particular point, we'll just kind of play off other as we're going through this. We've got that as a green arrow, as a good thing, but keep that in the back of your mind as when we look at these pressure points that are coming down in legislation that's coming out of Lansing.
And then inflation outside of COVID years has been, right around 3.5 or less %. So us being able to have those uncappings has been very key for us and the new development coming into the county. Investment income and federal revenue does fluctuate. We do expect that to go down at least the next year and then start going back up as the ARPA dollars are fully spent. Those have been a key source of investment income. And fortunately, unlike other federal grants, they've allowed us to use that for unrestricted purposes. Typically, you have to use it for a purpose of the grant since you earned it from the grant dollars. State shared revenue has remained flat for us for fiscal year 25 and 26 at about $13.5 million. The House has a proposal right now to increase all of the counties collectively by $19.5 million. So I did include in our projection for 27 to be $14.4 million based on our percentage that we typically get of that state shared revenue. I'm not sure if you're aware, but they did pass a state shared revenue trust fund that's supposed to make that revenue source more stable. It's a committed revenue stream. The general sales tax deposits would go in there, any general donations that are made. I don't know who would do that, but in case they do. And then investment income on those dollars would remain in the trust fund instead of, being in the state's coffers to decide if they want to give you that investment income or not. We did include a conservative 1% each year after 2027 because that is a volatile revenue. If those collections go down, then our revenue would go down. So it still has some volatility to it, but it should be more stable than it has been in the past. And then the remaining revenue includes items like charges for services at the department level, fines and forfeitures that we collect, and then other intergovernmental revenue. We did estimate those to increase about 2 to 3% each year, just by looking at historical trends. Unless we knew of something in the fiscal year 2027 budget when we did revenue that would impact those future years. So I already used that Gratiot County is no longer doing work through the ME's office. So we took how much we collect from them and we decreased that revenue and then projected that forward. So items that we know were changing, we did incorporate into that as well. Yes. What they're talking about.
Have we, this is a tricky question, have we considered any assumptions about cost savings relative to technological improvements or something like that the county can save money on and build those assumptions in?
So we have had these conversations with departments over time. I think, I know some of you have sat through the last few years of budget meetings. I think sometimes people point to the number of staff they had 5 years ago and that's where they're trying to get back to. And to your point, I think we've had some technology advances that you may not need 10 people if that's what you had 5 years ago, maybe you need 8. So we do challenge them to try to think that way. I think there are certain departments that just comes natural to them. They can see that that's happening and then through attrition, they may not replace people. But I still challenge people to think about that. And is there some software that could help your team that would be less costly than replacing an entirely new staff? So we do still have those conversations, but I think some people, especially if they've been here a really long time, expect to have the same staff level and provide the same level of service that they have always before. So we'll continue that, but we haven't seen a lot of that coming to the table.
Until it's realized, we don't want to include it in the budget because it may not come to be. I think Marty's got a question.
Yeah, I think that that's been a problem even with, before you was here with your predecessor. He would talk to different departments and explain that to them that just because that's what you used to have doesn't necessarily you need to go back to that. The whole county has to be very cognizant.
And I will
And
say,
so I'm glad you're on that and talking to them about it.
and I will say, even if you're short-staffed, I know when I came into the county, people were doing certain things because that's how they were trained. Like we had check copies over here and then another check copy over here for that retirement office because they didn't trust that the copy would be over here. It's like, this is ridiculous. We're spending time printing that piece of paper. And I say, let me show you. So to your point, I think if they've been trained a certain way, they might just keep doing that until someone identifies there's a better way or a more efficient way. So we didn't lose people, but that person can now focus on higher level tasks, and we don't need as much added power, I guess, in the
A
department.
lot of that's just human nature, you know, I deal with office too, and you have, sometimes you gotta let go of some of those things you used to do, because you just don't need to do it anymore.
Yes.
There's another way of doing it that's so much quicker. We as human beings, it's just natural for us to keep doing the same thing. Government, it's even more noticeable.
Even worse usually.
And I think progressively we've been more and more aggressive year over year with that, and we'll continue that trend to be more and more aggressive as departments bring those requests forward.
It's all about training.
And when we got to salaries and wages, we did look at, again, we use the 2027, what's in the budget right now in this projection, but that is subject to change based on review. We did use a 3.81% annual based on the 3 years ago prior adopted budgets. And the reason we looked at adopted versus amended budget is we've been doing those vacancy sweeps every quarter. So if we look at the amended budget, it's going to be much less than what those departments started with at the beginning of the year. And this will include raises, medical cost fluctuations. So every year that tends to go up based on that hard cap. And then fringes that will fluctuate with the wages. So, you know, if your wage goes up, then your retirement, if it's a % of your wages, also goes up.
We do want to emphasize that we took the average over the last 3 years just to make an assumption for the next 5 years. So ultimately, that number is going to be based on whatever comes out of negotiations. That isn't saying that wages are going to go up that amount. It could be more, it could be less based on negotiations.
And then department level non-personnel, we did a 3% increase as an assumption, unless we knew of something like a contract that's been approved for, say, a 3 to 5 year period that has a cost that increases higher than that, then we would have included the actual cost of that contract. Capital outlay, we did budget gradual increases. As we know, our capital needs are not getting cheaper. They're getting more expensive as time goes on. The bond payments that you'll see included in there are right from our amortization schedules for our annual bond payments that we make. And then appropriation and transfers out are related to grant matches, as well as our required contributions for like the health department, stuff like that. So as those costs increase, our appropriations and transfers also increase. So we did build that into the forecast as well. And then we talked about priorities earlier, and one of the long-term financial stability is our legacy costs. Our pension contributions are still expected to increase somewhat. We do have people falling out of the plan as they age out, but we still have some people who are active that are still eligible to go into that defined benefit pension plan. We only have 57 people left that are eligible upon retirement to get those pension contributions. And once that happens, then we should see that contribution go down. We do have our actuary doing a new valuation right now that we should have by the end of June to have a better idea of what that looks like before we actually adopt next year's budget. And
Mr.
then,
Mr. Cousineau? Microphone.
In the actuary, they're looking at how much we expect it to cost us when those 57 retire, or are we just looking at what it's actually costing us now.
So
with
the actuarial
retirees.
valuation will figure out what the estimated total liability is for our retirees who are currently receiving benefits and these 57 people once they are eligible for retirement. That valuation also determines what our annual contribution from general fund or these other grant funds would be. So we will have that number ahead of adopting fiscal year 2027 budget to see if it went up or down. But the last few years it's gone up just because as people who are charged to grants and other funding sources retire, we can't charge that pension contribution to that grant anymore. It's only when they're active. So that becomes part of the general fund cost, and that's why that increases as we go forward.
Crystal, can I ask a question on OPEB? I think I'm remembering this right, but at one point the county was under a requirement or a mandate that we contribute a certain percentage because we were so distant from what the liability is. But I understand that's not the case anymore, but we're still contributing that amount because we can and because it's a priority?
So yes, so we were on a corrective action plan. There's a two-part test. You either have to be 40% funded or your actuarially determined annual contribution has to be less than, I think it's 12% of your governmental revenue. So subsequent to that year that we had the corrective action plan, we fell off of not meeting that second metric. But at any point, if our revenue drops and that annual contribution is more than those governmental revenues, then we could have to go back on a corrective action plan. So that's why during the budget process, we've continued with that annual 2% increase that was adopted as part of that corrective action plan so that we can show, yes, we fell off and if we came back on, we stayed course with what we proposed to do at that point in time.
Am I remembering right that the 2% is also, even though it's better than what we were required to do, or it's the same as what we were required to do, and we're keeping that even though we don't have that corrective action plan, that it's not anywhere near where we would want it in terms of trying to catch up with the liability?
Yeah, so, we've had the active healthcare fund has been way over budget. Fortunately, the retiree healthcare fund has been under budget. I think the last update we got there were about 600,000 under budget. So, that helps when we're not drawing those funds out of that trust and we're still putting funds in. Those funds sit there and earn interest, and so that helps increase our level of funding. So all of that combined helps us with that percentage of funding.
Thank you.
But also to your point, number 2 priority, long-term financial stability, OPEB is one of the priorities.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for that reminder.
So I guess that's a good feed into the active healthcare fund transfers. We had a deficit elimination plan at the end of 2025. We're anticipating to have to contribute more for 2026. We're going to see what the savings are at the end of this fiscal year to do that. We're also crunching the numbers for the 2027 budget. But if that continued high utilization continues, general fund will be on the hook to cover any of those shortfalls that fund can't collect enough through the biweekly payroll to put into that fund to cover those fees.
We are trending in a good direction in terms of it's not as much as it was last year. We're still over, but we're going in that right direction.
There was a presentation that covered the catastrophic events over so many people, and so we hope that that's not a recurring theme in our population, but that's unfortunately, if you have people in your family, that at any point something like that can happen and it's out of your control. The animal care fund needs, if the fund balance were to be depleted, we would have to have general fund cover that as well. They have approximately $743,000 in fund balance at the end of 25. Their budget is expecting to use $419,000 for 26. I do have my team currently looking at, they did have some staffing vacancies that I think is going to reduce that amount. But if that were to be true, they would only have $324,000 left at the end of 26. Which is about 11.7% of their annual expenses. So if that trend were to continue, general fund would have to figure out how to make those transfers and to make them whole. And then we know the disposal of the old admin building has been something we've been working on, but obviously as you hold that, we have continued costs to keep it up, as well as the unknown cost of what it's going to be to dispose of that building. We are working on that, but that's just not something that we have a known dollar amount at this point.
can I, go ahead, Dr. Brown.
How much is it costing us to maintain that building every month?
I can get that. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I can get that for you.
So we don't have the air on at the level that it was, obviously. If you go in there most of the time, the air isn't even on. We've got to keep the power onto it for two reasons. Number one, all of the pumps, the sumps are all below grade, so to get stuff out of the building, it has to be pumped up to get out. But also the jail is fed from the administration building. So, you know, we've had discussions before about our need to separate those, and we're working on that. Consumers has done their part. Did we approve the resolution with the electric company? I can't remember.
Consumers we did. I don't think we've done the second piece
Okay.
yet.
Then we're just waiting on the bid to come back on that to do the above ground work and make that change. So we're working to try to get that offline, and then also, you remember the Mott Foundation gave us a grant to come up with some specs and do the environmentals, and we're hoping that goes out to bid by the end of this month, and then we can have a proposal to you by the end of the year to get a price on offing that.
And then just talking through some key pressure points. Our inmate healthcare currently is being funded by the healthcare millage. If that's not renewed at some point, that cost will shift to general fund, and that's about $5.6 million. We do have volatile grant funding, and so it's very difficult. I know when people are coming and saying we can't do without this, you know, but we may have to make some decisions on what key programs do you want to maintain and fund, because those would have to become part of general fund. And then continued capital needs. You know, we're trying to be proactive versus reactive. I think we all know once you get into an emergency repair mode, the costs skyrocket. You see those emergency purchases, and it's hard to swallow. So we want to continue on that path to be proactive versus reactive related to those.
Crystal, on the top of the inmate healthcare, we have a new provider that is still in their first year. Am I right about that? Or is it second year?
I believe this is their second year, VitalCore.
How many, and VitalCore? How many years is the contract for? And is there a mechanism within the contract where they are able to increase what they charge?
There was an annual increase, but I don't recall if it was one where we did the 3-year contract and a 2-year possible renewal. I would have to look and see what that is.
I think that's the way it is, yeah. And it's got an automatic inflation.
So it's tied to the rate of inflation, not medical inflation or healthcare, which is a lot higher, I think, than just general.
We can get that data.
I'd be curious to know
Okay.
what's built into the contract in terms of the increase mechanism. Thank you.
And then back to the pension that we talked about earlier. Currently, through payroll, we have people working on grants and other funding sources that we charge a percentage of payroll to go into the pension plan. That amounts to about $3.5 million. And we've been lucky enough in all the history I've been here that we've had enough people falling out of the plan. So when we have new retirements, they kind of wash. But let's say tomorrow, all of these people charged to grants decided to resign or retire. That $3.5 million would then have to be funded by general fund. And then the DTR transfers, you know, those are volatile.
Can we just back up to that? You guys understand what she's saying there, right? Like, we've got people working in a grant-funded department that we're, okay, I just want to make sure everybody's on. Somebody's in working in the health department that has a pension. Health department's primarily funded with grants, so the grant is capturing the cost of that. When that person retires, the grant's no longer capturing that cost, right? Or offsetting that cost, so then the general fund has to pick up that contribution.
So the grants will only pay for it while you're currently working. Once you're gone, they don't want any part of funding capital typically, or any legacy costs related to when that person.
Commissioner Kuzma.
So while they're working under those grants, we're not charging enough to the grants to put into the pension?
We are currently charging 150% of someone's payroll. We were increasing that annually, and the grant said we are not giving you more than that amount. They put a cap on it. So that's why we only charge that amount through payroll.
Grants are basically underfunding. Depending on how you
No,
want
I
to word
mean,
it.
so
semantics.
we get our annual required contribution and we spread it across general fund and then the individuals that are currently working to get to what we need for the year. But the grants, like I said, they will only fund fringe rates up to a certain dollar amount, but they're paying for their future retirement, plus it's helping us put in for our total required contribution for the year. But you know, back when everybody was eligible, it was a much lower percentage per person. And then as people retired and we had to keep increasing it, the grants were okay with that for a while, but now at 100, you know, if I'm paying 150% of your wage just for your pension contribution, the grant doesn't want to do that because they want the funds out into the community providing that program service, not funding someone's pension or other fringes related to the staff that aren't doing those programs.
Part of the cost.
Yes, it is. Yeah. But that's same thing with OPEB. We contribute 25% of the eligible person's pay into OPEB for future contributions, and the grants have said that's as high as we're going as well. Trust me, if we could increase it higher, I would.
Yeah, you know, it's important to remember that if we didn't have that grant, all of it would be on the general fund because that employee is not going anywhere, right? I think sometimes department heads get confused that, oh, well, I don't want this person in my department because they've got a pension. Well, the general fund's going to pick up that cost, whether that person's in your department or somebody else's department. But the reason we attach a number to it is so that we can leverage that grant and get as much of that offset as possible, even if it's not 100%.
I agree.
Yeah.
By the same token, you know, when we get a grant,
yeah,
that grant's cost us more than what we really think it is.
Sure.
So there were, yeah.
Nothing's free.
Well, I wanted to have that conversation earlier, but I had to go to the bathroom.
TMI. So in the past, Crystal, am I correct in understanding that we have been able to bake in those pension numbers, but recently the cap has been put on?
Yeah, so when everyone was working, we might have only been charging or eligible for pension. We might have only been charging, say, I'm just going to make up a number, 10% of your wages went into pension. Well, now that that's not the case and we have a split plan, right? We have defined contribution because it's cheaper in the long run. And then we have defined benefits still for people who are still eligible. So like Josh mentioned, it's to our advantage to still be able to attach that to those people because we're recovering something. Because if we couldn't charge them, general fund would have to pick up that full bill, which would be right now 3.5 million higher than we're currently contributing. So it's when you're looking to apply for a grant, they're okay with you having wages and fringes, but they don't want it to be an exorbitant. So when we got to the 125% and tried to push it, I can understand where they're saying that's crazy. We're already paying more than the wage on top of medical, FICA, you know, PTO time, and now you want us to keep giving you money for your legacy costs. So we are at an advantage to be able to charge that grant, but there's a point where they're saying that's the top of what we're willing to pay you for that particular fringe. And unfortunately, we did get to that point, but it's still a very large dollar amount.
Crystal, just a question in general about pensions, and you know, I'm asking you to look into your crystal ball. But at any rate, would there ever be a time that once we got caught up with how I look at it and defined benefit people, that we could go back to a program like that?
Typically what you find across the state is people have switched to either a hybrid plan or defined contribution, because once you make that contribution, that pay period, your involvement is done. You don't have to worry about how long people are going to live to try to set aside dollars to fund them a set amount forever. You could revisit it if you get to a point where you could fit it into the budget, but I think we're probably a long ways away from being able to.
past my time. I'm just
Yeah, we'll probably not be here, at least here at the county.
realize that,
but
you know.
yeah.
looked at the actual, you know.
Yeah, we look at the Marty and I both sit on the board for GSERS, and so we the deaths every month, and then the new retirees, and we're trying to see if what it looks like every month. But we want people to live a long, healthy life and enjoy the benefit. But when they fall out of the plan, it does reduce our required contribution. And then the DTR transfers, that's just an annual discussion that we have with the treasurer's office. So those are up for debate every year. I've been working on them already.
Crystal, remind me what DTR is.
Oh, I'm sorry. The Delinquent Tax Revolving Fund.
Yeah.
So this is the fund that the treasurer's office has where they collect those delinquent taxes. Once those tax years are settled, they can decide what to do with the leftover proceeds. And so we've been lucky enough that they've helped fund not only some of our annual costs for the year, but they've also done like the $5 million housing project and some other things that would have been difficult for general fund to come up with the funding. They've been very easy to work with to come up with funding for some other things as well.
Basically what it is the fines and penalties that
And that number is different than those lawsuits that are going around with excess proceeds, right?
And then continuing with the pressure points, the child care fund, they've had fund balance. When I first got here, I realized we were giving appropriations every quarter based on the budget. So if a grant fund needed, say, $1 million in county appropriations, we split that up by 4, contributed it to the fund. Well, no one was looking at the end of the year to see how much was actually spent on that grant, to see how much our appropriation had to be, and then sweeping back any amount that was left over. So we started doing that several years ago, but the child care fund had over $4 million of fund balance. So last year, for the 2026 budget, they built in to use $2.3 million of that fund balance instead of having the full amount come from the county for that appropriation. And so they have just over $2 million that they could use again for 2027. But after that, general fund will be funding that full. I think it's 50% or 25% depending on the age, 18 or 17, and some other caveats from the state. But we are mandated to make that appropriation every year.
Crystal, would you give us just a general elevator speech around child care fund? It's a state established?
Yes.
And, go ahead.
It's handled by circuit court. It's a state mandated fund. I know there was a separate one called Raise the Age for a minute, I think it was for 17-year-olds. But it's for, I believe,
juveniles, yeah,
around juvenile care. And
so when they become, when they come to the county, we have a responsibility to take care of them. Part of that child care fund, part of that cost is offset by the state of Michigan. Part of it is offset by the county.
Then similar to the pension contribution we just had, those same people, well, not the same necessarily if they're eligible for OPEB but not pension, but we have about $2.4 million that we're charging to grants right now for OPEB that if those people were to leave would also possibly increase our need for an additional amount coming from general fund. Unlike pension, OPEB is not mandated that you pre-fund, but we have been doing that additional funding, which has been increasing it slightly, the balance of that fund every year, to have those funds set aside for future retiree health care.
Remind me about what that acronym stands for. I think employee benefits.
Sorry, other post-employment benefits.
Other post-employment, thank you.
And in this particular case, it's just retiree health care that's not related to any other benefit. I'm not sure how many of you have been reading the potential property tax reforms, but they are moving along through the system. I can't remember where they're at this point. Okay. I was saying Melissa and Josh probably know. This would be very devastating for the county if this goes through without a replacement funding source. It potentially eliminates the uncapping of tax. So when we talked earlier, if Marty sells his house tomorrow and the new homeowner moves in, you know, you get that lovely thing later because you buy a house estimating what your tax bill is going to be. Lo and behold, your escrow wasn't enough, and you get a statement that says we're going to have to withhold more because your tax was uncapped and you had to pay a higher amount than the person before you. Melissa has been working on reports related to what that uncapping amount would be. But that is, you know, when we talked earlier about the proposal A limiting it to the lesser of 5% or inflation, which has been 3% or less typically, you know, we've been able to be over that 5% with those uncapping and new developments. So if that ability to do that goes away, that's going to be very detrimental to our most significant revenue source for general fund. They are also expanding the personal property tax exemption. We were looking at that earlier, trying to decipher what that would mean for us. It is also going to be a large dollar amount, especially if there's replacement for reimbursement, but there's not enough information, I think, at this point to tell you exactly how much that's going to be.
So then that revenue that the county is collecting is just gone on the county side, and then the resident should see an amount, whatever that amount would be, on their.
Yeah, so that last bullet there, where it says would eliminate taxes on all equipment, that is contingent upon that other piece of the utility billing being approved as well. So I know when I saw that come through, I had a panic attack. So I'm not sure about Melissa and Josh, but we're keeping a close eye on that. So as we go through the budget cycle, we will definitely keep you updated on any progress and updates that we see related to that.
Crystal, maybe it's too new and too sort of multi-factored, but is there an estimated
We
dollar?
were trying to crunch those numbers. I was in other meetings, and then Melissa and I and Carla were putting our heads together trying to crunch some numbers. I believe Melissa came up with some very preliminary estimates.
Yeah, you can actually go ahead and sit with us, and you can use the mic.
So I did this afternoon, because I had meetings this morning, based on our total personal property taxable value for 2026, we would have a revenue loss of about $10 million.
But the general fund portion was it like 5.5, I think, million?
Yeah, it was that's the total. So I broke it down by our millages. So operating, it's 5.2.
5.2 for general fund, and then the other special voted millages like the senior center and the veterans, and that would be hit by another $5 million.
That's a rough estimate with a complete
Should have led with that before the seniors left.
Right? You should have put me first.
And we did get our equalization directors have been working on spreadsheets so we can calculate the uncapping back from 23 or 20, yeah, 23 to 26. So I just got that spreadsheet from one of our directors. And I'll work on that over the next.
I could update the commissioners if you'd like. So just a recap of the most significant items that we talked about. So the additional pension contributions outside of general fund of the 3.5 million, the OPEB contributions of about 2.4 million, and then that inmate healthcare, that is a large ticket item at the 5.5. So those are things that we just have to keep in the back of our mind as we move forward. Like I said, the pension and OPEB, we've had enough people falling off the plan that it's not been a drastic increase every year, but there is always that potential if all of those people were to sign to retire or terminate tomorrow. And then that leads into the request that we talked about earlier. You do have some items in your queue for for consideration that haven't been moved because we were waiting for budget time. One of those is 2 executive directors of community engagement for the sheriff's office. That's just over $224,000. 2 lieutenants that were charged to a ghost interdiction team grant that expired. That's just over $521,000. If people are coming to ask for ARPA positions, which I think they will be to keep after the first quarter of 2027, that will be $811,655. But I also put the full year cost there, which is almost $90,000 for the full year, and that we'll talk in a second has been baked into what we're going to look at. And then also the high crimes for the prosecutor's office. We know there's been some hopes and discussions that that funding will continue. However, if it doesn't, that's another $3 million that we have to figure out how to fit in for the prosecutor's office.
Crystal?
So in total, if you approved all of these requests, just for fiscal year 2027, our costs would go up about $4.6 million. So what Josh is handing out, there's 2 versions.
One request would be just
Yes, I do.
I think I saw Mr. Shoemaker's hand. Am I right, Sean?
That's mine.
You're welcome. I wanted to ask where, so I think of when we have individuals in the community that have projects that they're interested in us providing support for. Mr. Kim comes to mind. $750,000 I think was the total of it over a couple of years. Where would that kind of thing fit in this list?
It would be something we would have to add into. Yeah, they're not included here, so it'd be something that we'd have to add. And what I will say is, the use of fund balance for something like that, that's a one-time cost that we can turn off at any time, isn't seen the same way as, we're dipping into fund balance because we have to pay people and we don't have enough money to sustain the staff that we have. Those are 2 very different things. So if you decided, you wanted to fund that, and we, for whatever period he requested, I can't remember, I think it was a multi-year.
2.
We could add that and use fund balance. And I think some people think if you use fund balance, it's not a balanced budget. But if your expenses exceed revenue, but you have available fund balance, that's still considered a balanced budget. It's just you're using, some of the fund balance that you've realized from previous years to fund those one-time projects.
Right.
We've typically done that only for like capital or those one-time costs over the last few years.
So for my purposes, this list would be, as we get requests that are of substantial amounts, I would like to see them added to this list, at least until we decide whether to do them or not, so we have some sense of what's sitting out there.
Are you talking about this?
I'm
forecast?
talking about this list right here. So
Okay, sure.
requests. I think I've heard that there's one coming around healthcare or fruits and vegetables, and it's
They're
an
always
MSU.
coming. They're always
I know.
coming.
So what would be helpful to me personally is just to have a list with an amount, so I have a sense of what's sitting out there. And you've obviously got to start here. These are all internal, right? So I'm thinking of the ones where people appear at committee meetings and other places, and we're asked to consider things. And maybe you just put them in a different category, but I'd like to know
if
what
those are
they're.
communicated to me, we can track those and see what that looks like.
Commissioner Cousineau?
Yeah, I was just going to say that this is one list, but what you're saying is a whole different list, and it shouldn't be intermingled with us considering. I know what Commissioner Wayhell's saying is that we need to know what's being asked. On the political trail, I tell people, you just say no right up front, it ends the whole conversation. But
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think if we track them maybe in a separate color code or whatever, just so we know.
Shoemaker and I have also had the conversation about, when memos come to me in Legistar, I put in the memo if it's going to cost general fund more money and what that looks like, what the budget amendment's for. But he had said, well, it'd be nice to have a snapshot of each meeting, which resolutions are going to impact general fund and by how much, so I have a good summary. So I started doing that last meeting. I mean, if any of the rest of that would be helpful, just to have a snapshot, I could always send that to you as well.
Honest, do you want us to put that on the header on your agenda as a last number, general fund impact, additional general fund impact and the dollar amount? So when you're looking at your agenda, it has the squib there, and then right after it, we could do in all caps, additional general fund impact outside of the adopted budget.
That would be very nice. It makes it more apparent. I understand that it needs to be that way. Generally, I'm okay with the way you're doing it now, but I think that would make it very clear to all of us right away.
And when it gets to Crystal's queue, if they're outside of the adopted budget, if there's an additional general fund, she'll add that to the end of the squib. Does that make sense?
See, I said I was going to talk till the end. Are we going to do it with additional items also outside of the general fund? Because there are, we've got something budgeted and then we're asked for, example, we were just asked for animal control shelter, that would have dipped into there. So we could just do it with all of them. Any fund that's above what the normal spending should, or what.
The adopted budget. Yeah, we can do that by fund. It's whatever you guys want. It's your agenda, so.
I don't want to speak for everyone. I mean, poor Crystal gets bugged by me a lot, but I've been concerned with things for a while because once again, we never met a grant that when we approve it, we don't keep funding it. You can't keep going at that. I sat in the prosecutor's meeting, and I'll never forget when we took them from Corporation Counsel and we gave all these raises. I sat there and I asked point blank. I said, "Prosecutor, what happens if we don't get these?" Because here's the problem. We don't just have to cut people. Because they gave those big raises, you have to cut more people. And we just said, okay, we're just going to move forward. Because that's what we do. This is, not that we're in dire straits, but you know what? All these extra little fringy, fun little things we want to do, we're going to make some tough decisions this budget process. Because we have been very blessed that we've had economic growth for a very long time now, whether it's been propped up by the federal government continuously since story. But eventually, that has to adjust. That bubble, we've all been around. The bubble has to kind of hurt. And I'm a little concerned with it. Like I said, I'll keep voicing my opinion on it. I've always been cheap and frugal with it because it's not my money. And I do appreciate Crystal, though, all you do with everything, and Marty with this committee. We gotta really make this transparent, not just to us, though, to our staff, to our department heads, to our co-electeds. Sit down and take a look at this because this is. I really appreciate Dale you putting this on the agenda because I think it's very important, and then I'll save my other questions for later. So thank you,
Commissioner Cousineau.
I don't want to burst anybody's bubble, no pun intended. But, yeah, we have to always remain cautious, conservative with the money. We've come a long way from what it used to be here. And we have some options now, very little options, but we do have. That can go away anytime. Probably will at some point in time. I don't have my crystal ball, but the economy can change anytime. We've seen it in the past. It's just how our free market system works. It goes through corrections. Sooner or later it'll happen. We can just forecast the best we can, and I'm always real comfortable with how Crystal does and make the best decision, but you always got to keep that in mind. What Commissioner Shoemaker's always reminding us of is that bubble can burst at any given time. That's totally out of our control or knowledge when it's going to happen. Well, because our economy goes through corrections.
And I think it may be helpful to start doing these types of meetings where we're pointing out these pressure points to you, maybe on a quarterly basis, as we go into budget season, but then also sorry about that, also as we adopt the budget and monitor the budget going forward. So I think a combination of in your face about, hey, this decision means this, and then also monitoring where we're at in this type of way, and having these types of conversations will go a long way in ensuring that we're sticking on a financially stable and responsible path.
That is our primary function as a governing body, is budgetary. And I understand wanting to do all these other things, but budgetary is what all 9 of us should be watching at all points in time. So the more apparent or the more obvious it is with, coming from you and Josh, that it makes it easier for the 9 of us to keep that as we come up with different.
I wanted to have a board in the auditorium where it would just tally it up, but Josh said that. Like it would go in the red when you voted on something that cost.
It'd be a visual
It got
control.
voted down, I guess.
It's a elite strategy.
So you have 2 sheets in front of you. One of them says without request at the top, so that's without the requests that are listed here on this slide. Again, I did include what's currently in our financial software for budget for staffing. It is subject to review by my office and then through the budget hearings to see if anything will change. But typically we've been able to work through every budget cycle since I've been here to get to where our revenue does equal expense, or we're only dipping into fund balance for one-time costs. Like on the bottom of the 26 budget, you do see that we're using fund balance of 4.2 million. Those are one-time costs. So we had the jail netting project that was approved last fiscal year. It wasn't fully completed by the end of the year, so 1.5 million had to go into this year's budget. But as we mentioned, that was savings
Everybody
last
with
year.
her on the sheets.
No, I'm not.
Last page.
Sorry, last page.
Last page of.
And the amended budget 26 column.
Last page of the without. Yep. So if you see that change in fund balance,
I don't want you to panic. Those were one-time things that were
4.2 million?
approved.
yep,
Yes.
those were expected, and that's what she was explaining. That
So we saved that 1.5 million last year because the project didn't happen, but now we have to use that fund balance that we closed it to fund the rest of that jail netting project. And then we had 2.7 million that we had to transfer from general fund to the active healthcare fund as part of that deficit elimination plan. So those 2 items make up that 4.2. There's nothing operational wise within general fund that caused us to have to use fund balance.
and we used that 2.7 was from savings last year. So if you remember, we had $5 million in savings last year. So that 2.7 was paid this year. So that's why it looks like it was coming out of. It looks like it's a negative.
But we decided, well, the board, to do that all at one time as opposed to trying to squeeze that. And you have 5 years to do a corrective action plan, but trying to squeeze that amount in the next 5 years was going to be difficult. So you decided, since we had savings from last fiscal year, just to go ahead and do that one-time contribution into the active healthcare fund. And then the second version that doesn't say without request shows what those requests would look like, what it would do to fund balance if you were to approve those items today, because that is the fiscal year 27 cost. That's not the future cost of what those are. So if you go to the back page of the one that does not say without requests, you can see we would be dipping into fund balance for 27 by the 4.5. 28 would go up over 5 million, all the way up to 5.6 million at the end of 2031. So, and again, that's using that same projection for the increase in wages and fringes.
Commissioner Shoemaker.
This number, just for clarification, when we go from 4.5 to 5, is that each year then? The damage being done is, so a
It's
total
going to be
between
what it cost us in 27, plus we applied that same increase in fringes and salaries for those positions for each of those subsequent.
It's not communicable or cumulative.
So what I'm saying, just to clarify clearly, between 27 and 28 and 28 and 29, that's $10.2 million.
Yes.
Yes.
Crystal, what is our fund balance approximately?
I think it's around 40 million. I would have to look. I'm sorry. I've looked at so many numbers today.
That includes
Like
money,
40 to 42, but I would have to look.
but that includes the money that we set aside into capital
Yes.
improvements. So what is unrestricted? Better.
I can get that for you. I don't want to guess off the top of my head.
Well, I followed that throughout the years. There's always been a debate amongst you and others as to what would be the appropriate amount. So I know it's around 18 to 20. I might even heard 15 at one point in time,
Yeah, there's
something that we need to have at all times.
Yeah, so we do have a minimum fund balance policy. I think is 15%.
15 million or 15?
15% of our fund balance to be set
okay.
aside. 15% of our annual expenses plus appropriations to have available. Because a lot of our appropriations, like we mentioned, childcare fund, we can't just say we're not going to fund that next year. It's required. So that's why we add those two together. Most local units will just look at their expenses because transfers out are usually because they're transferring to a capital project or something that they can say we're just not doing that this year. But most guidelines would say you should have set aside 2 months worth of your operating expenses. But that's for places who do not have the large unfunded legacy costs, the large capital needs, things like that. So that's why you've assigned fund balance for a lot of those purposes, so that we don't deplete our fund balance below that.
All right. So if in next year, in the next year's budget, if we decide to spend money on the jail, with some repairs that we always talk about that are going to be needed to be done, there's money sitting in the general fund in a restricted fund.
Restricted. It's called assigned. So you've passed a resolution to assign.
Yeah.
So it gets a little tricky. Restrictions are third parties. So if they give us a grant that says purchase something, that's considered restricted. We can't restrict it ourselves, but you have assigned it for that purpose.
Correct.
So when we get to the end of the year and we do our annual report that goes to the state, we explain, we used X amount of fund balance. This was related to the use of assigned fund balance for this purpose that we had set aside, so that they understand why we had dipped into the fund balance.
Yeah, which is something that we never had back years ago.
Yeah, when I first started, there wasn't much going on by ways of assignment. So when you look at the fund balance, it was almost all unassigned, and it looked like we didn't have a plan. We were just stockpiling fund balance, but we knew we have a lot of needs related to capital. I think we have some OPEB, broadband, things like that we truly needed to be setting aside some dollars to utilizing.
Thank you.
Broadband is still assigned. And does that show up somewhere?
In our annual audit report, it shows up in assigned fund balance.
And get you a list of all, or
Sure.
counting of all assigned.
So really the difference between restricted, it's sort of an accounting term of art, right? Restricted is outside third-party grants. The assigned is us restricting it within the county commission restricting it for certain purposes.
It's just when you assign something as a commission, as a commission, you could go back and reverse that assignment. You can't reverse a restriction.
Right. It's not as serious or severe or I guess required. Can I ask I want to make sure I understand the two different spreadsheets. So the one that just says general fund forecast includes all of the things on the screen up there, all those requests. Is that
The one that doesn't say without requests?
so? The one that says general fund forecast, it includes all of that.
Yes.
And assumes that we will keep those things going year after year. So just for clarification, the most significant driver then is the prosecutor's $3 million for his operation, which is 30-some staff, I think, maybe more. it doesn't include the things I mentioned earlier, these sort of one-off requests that we get either from outside primarily.
So that goes back to if you were to approve those, we would probably use fund balance for those because those are one-time things that you want to do.
They're not built into our ongoing budget.
But if we're using fund balance for these operational things, that's something that's harder to explain to the state when we do our audit. It's also, we have a bond rating call once a year where they ask me a lot of questions about our spending and where we're trying to go. So if we're dipping into fund balance for operational needs, that would be a red flag, if you will, when we're having those discussions.
And then on the one which is labeled general fund forecast without request, we have a deficit the first year, or that's this year, right?
That's what we just talked about, those, the jail netting and the active healthcare.
It was planned to do that, taking from fund balance?
Yes.
But there are blanks or zeros in the other columns. Does that mean it's a balanced budget?
Yes, so that means, like I said, since we've been here, we've been able to work through with the departments to get a budget adopted at revenue equals expenses, at least for operational needs. And then we have made transfers. Like several years ago, we did large capital transfers into the tower project fund, knowing that renovation was coming. So we've done dips into fund balance for things like that, but not for normal operations.
Understood. That's very helpful. I think this exercise is very illuminating to me anyway, so appreciate it. Thank you.
Like I said, if this property tax reform comes into play and we start dropping that in, this is going to look much different. But we're hoping that some form of reimbursement is going to come into play that will at least get us close to being made whole.
So is it too simple to say, I heard the $10 million figure from you, half of which is general fund. Would the full 10 million be reflected in deficits in these, or just the 5?
Just the 5. So,
okay.
Well, I'll caveat that. So let's say these special voted millage funds are doing really great right now, but we're going to hack at their revenue. If they have deficits, general fund we would have to file a deficit elimination plan and say how we're going to. So that's why I said
Just across
this would
all
be
funds.
very drastic for all of those funds. They would have to figure out how they're going to bring their expenses in line with.
Mm-hmm. Right. So even the estimate where it's essentially a balanced budget without the additional requests, if the legislature were to do something without replacement revenue along the lines of what we've talked about, that would throw us into not only a general fund issue, but for these other
So we would definitely right away
funds.
relook at this analysis to see what does taking out the uncappings. She's looking at what those historical amounts have been. We would also have to look at those special millage funds and say, this is the revenue you're going to be losing. Start looking at your expenses now and what can and some of them have discretionary spending that they could eliminate. They've been doing those services because they have the dollars, but they would have to look at their budget and figure out how to cut some of those programming.
Thank you. You have more presentation? Oh,
I had.
you want to come sit with us
I wish
now?
I had good news. I'm sorry. I wish I could.
While we
Oh,
have
we have an extra
discussion and
5
Q&A,
million?
why don't you, you're welcome to come sit, and if you have to answer questions or comment, you can use the microphone at the table. So let's open it up for commissioners who have questions, comments, thoughts that they want to share. And
how we need to
other commissioners? Sean, did you have some questions you wanted to end with? Go right ahead.
Thank you.
Jeez, oh, Pete.
Okay. Page 2, Crystal, I think I've answered this, but you said you guys use conservative number of 5.2 and the base of the historical trend. So what you're saying as far as what you believe is going to be as far as a revenue increase is going to be reflected on the last page of the general fund forecasting then.
Property taxes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. My next thing is for the board. One, I mean, I hope they don't I know the House approved it, but the secondary effects from this could be catastrophic. Because you're going to have people not purchasing certain houses and not buying certain houses because guess what? Their taxes are already higher. You know, I mean, like mine was bought 11 years ago, so my house taxable value is almost half of what it is worth. Yeah, my house can be very favorable to buy because guess what? You'd be capped where the person who just bought the house down the street from me. Guess what? That's less value. There's so many secondary effects from this. I hope people reevaluate this. Just replacing the revenue is not enough. This is going to be a big so. Like I said, it's very concerning, and hopefully it doesn't take place. But you had put under the revenue assumption, key revenue assumptions, remaining revenue on page 8, estimated at 2.3% increase from fiscal year ending 2027. What's that amount?
It would be the other, if you look at the forecast pages, it's going to be for lines like licenses and permits, fines and forfeitures, charges for services. We projected those as a 2 to 3% increase, unless we knew of something else that affected that revenue and we factored it in. So like I said, I think it's charges for services for medical examiners. They're including that Gratiot County charge. And we know that they're dropping out. I think it was about $40,000 a year. So we reduced that revenue from fiscal year 2027 on by that dollar amount.
My next question is this is to the whole board, or maybe more of a statement. What are we doing to make sure that, guess what, all those costs are being covered when we give somebody a quote that we're doing a service for them? You know, this is back to, you know, one, when we provide a service, making sure we're getting what we're paid for, but also making sure that when we bid out a service that it's actually covered. Not to say that we don't have experts when it's this, but if you're an example in the health department or even at the coroner's office, it doesn't mean you're, because I'm assuming that's who's putting together the estimate of what we're charging,
So
correct?
typically, if a department's doing something like that, so a good example would be GIS. They were doing the aerial flight project across multiple local units. So I believe it was Derek Bradshaw and I met with Ken Colita, went through, you know, he was focused on what bills do I have to pay, but we also looked at what is your staff time to do this project, build that in. So typically they will meet with our office and try to go through what they think the analysis is, and then we'll point out if we think other things need to be added. So the medical examiner's office also did do a estimate and discussed it with me as well.
This is kind of a concern for me because one, I'm not sure we're collecting all the costs. Two, there's an opportunity cost. We're giving up something because we're doing additional service for other people and we really haven't added much staff. So we're not getting things. And even if they do add staff, what else could we be doing with our time other than taking care of the municipality? So is it out of the norm for a municipality to charge additional funds above just what the basic cost is? Is that allowed?
Yeah, I mean, when you're spending your staff's time to do that, yeah, I mean, an admin cost. So it's just like if you do, you know, grants allow you to charge a certain percent of admin. So we usually include something like that. It's not an astronaut. Like we're not adding a bunch of money just to try to make general fund money. It's a true picture of how much time do you spend on that.
Could you?
I don't think that the local unit's going to pay it if they know that you're upcharging significantly.
Here's the thing: where are you going to get it? Certain services, they're tough to get. They're brought to us all the time, you know, and we're providing an expertise that, like the coroner's office, I believe, an expertise that's not really locally around. And we were the lowest unit as far as cost, and they had to drive even further, so they're going to give up some costs. I'm not saying gouge people, but what I'm saying is, make sure it's well worth our time instead of just saying, well, we've covered the basics.
I mean, I can't comment on what they need to run and operate. I unfortunately am not an expert on all of those things. It would be nice if I was. But I do try to look at the big picture with them. But to your point, I don't know if there's other things they could be doing if they weren't servicing those other counties.
Well, but it's not their expertise, okay? It's not their expertise to put a proposal together to say, this is what I believe it cost us. It's like, you know, even in my company, what I do, yes, I provide the software and stuff like that, but when it comes to training and how much it's really going to cost us and what the actual evaluation is of that, when we're selling that, somebody else does that because that's their expertise. So we don't leave money or lose money by doing something for someone else.
I mean, should they be charging more because the market says other people are paying more? That I don't know. I don't know what.
So I think that would be a policy decision. If that's what the Board of Commissioners want us to do, is to bake in some percentage above and beyond to help cover those unknown costs, those opportunity costs that we may be losing because we're providing the service, we can absolutely do that. And when that comes to you for approval, you'll see where that number's baked in. But we can do whatever you guys want us to do.
One, we're not catching everything that we supply. Let's say supplies, all the other stuff. You know,
Crystal's pretty stingy.
she's almost.
The Dream Crusher. It's my name.
And I appreciate every bit about you. But
I think it's significantly different than when you first got here, right? Where we weren't capturing those things.
It's still better, but
yeah,
we're asking people to put their expertise to something they're not.
Yeah.
And one, I don't think it's fair. Two, I don't think it's going to get us every dollar return we're supposed to get and capture. Even you go, like, example, you go to a car dealership, you always see shop supplies at the bottom. You notice that number just keeps going through the roof.
Yep.
Because one, they can get it.
Yep.
Okay. Two, guess what? They don't know. There are variables in there that they don't know. Because guess what? If the rotors are rusted on, they don't know how much spray they're going to put on there. They could spend $40 to try to get that thing off, or have to spend the money on the torch or anything else. It's not there. So that's why I just want to make sure, because we've got to watch every dollar.
For the rates that we charge for most things get approved during the budget process. We attach the rates to the.
Again, that's just it's a policy decision, and if that's what you guys want us to do, we can absolutely do that. We just need direction from the board on that.
Have with Dr. Hunter. I like your entrepreneurial thinking, though. It's about supply and demand and opportunity costs. But I think if Dr. Hunter needs another examiner in his office, we better start doubling or tripling our fees to cover the cost of that extra examiner. So that's a question, conversation with Dr. Hunter.
Well, it's not just the coroner's office. It's broader across the board. It's very hard. I'm sure Marty will agree with this. When you come from the business world and you go into government, you go, holy cow! It's just like, example, food services. What did we just say by going back to them and saying, "Hey, we need you to do better"? And amazingly, they're in the sales side of it. So they want that business. But we don't look at it that way, which we should do. And we've got to look at every dollar. Just like when we're providing a service, if we have something very unique, we got to make sure we're covering everything and then some. It's better to err on the caution for our residents to make sure they're getting every dollar than to make sure we err on, let's say another county side or whatever. On page, sorry.
I think they all say 8. I'm sorry, I didn't even see that bubble.
I didn't even look either. That's why I went, did I not flip I thought it actually flipped back on me. I did for a minute. I was like, holy cow.
That's the heading of the page.
Under pressure points, but there's several of them. The next one is active healthcare fund transfer.
Yes.
I just want to bring up to the board, to everybody, we got disposal of the old building. I know we just broached on it, but to me, this is something that we got to be full steam ahead. There's no everybody messing around a week or two here, or we didn't get this in this week. This has got to get done. One, because we're paying for the cost of the building. Two, we know costs are going up every second we wait. And I would like to see if there's a way just to put those funds aside now, a rough estimate, to get it out there, because, I know everybody believes I'm anti-Flint at times. We cannot leave that there for them. That is not there, because it's eventually going to become an eyesore. It already looks dingier than it normally does.
So we've got some of those dollars set aside for projects that may not be happening right now, and we can reassign that, right? So we put aside $3 million for a G-Card warehouse. That's not happening next year, and it's probably not happening the year after. Broadband likely is going to, if you guys decide to move forward with something, is likely going to be significantly less than what's set aside. So I would say conservatively, we have $5 to $6 million already set aside that could be reassigned to address the demolition piece. So we've been thinking about that, and we've been having those conversations.
It's just very concerning to me, one, that we are paying those additional dollars for this building. Next page then, inmates healthcare. I just, we hired a new company for this 2 years ago. Can we get the numbers of how many people were taken to actually a hospital for what type of care they're getting there instead of the provider doing it? I don't know if you, Captain Murphy, do you know, is this organization supposed to be drawing blood? Should they be taking them to the hospital to draw blood, or they should be doing it right at the county? For a patient, if they're, or not, sorry, resident at the. For blood draws? I don't just blood draws. And the reason I'm saying that is because I know we are taking people from your facility to Hurley and getting blood draws. Why? If they can do it, that's part of their contract. And these are the costs we need to look at every second, every day. Why? So if we could just get that number we're getting, and what we actually took them there for would be very helpful, because then we could tell if they're doing their job. Just kind of hold them accountable there, because I'm not expecting our officers to understand why they're sending them from one place to the other, because that's not their expertise, but it should be the provider's expertise. And those might be additional dollars that we say, hey, you're supposed to be doing this for us in-house. Well, they might be increasing their profit by saying, hey, we're going to send this to Hurley for a blood draw instead of doing it where they're supposed to. So it's just, and that's just one example. So if we could get that.
I'll send that request.
Commissioner Shoemaker, can I interrupt just for a second? So our Corporation Council's given us a recommendation, given that we lost a quorum when Commissioner Avery left a few minutes ago, that we adjourn the meeting but continue the discussion, and we'll keep it on YouTube. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'm going to, unless there's an objection, adjourn us. No. We can continue to have the conversation, but as a formal matter, it sounds like
I think it's just safer to adjourn the meeting so there's no accusation.
prudent to adjourn. This is exactly why we want you to interject like you're doing. We appreciate that. So without objection, I'll adjourn us at 8:07, but we will continue the conversation. Commissioner Shoemaker.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Page 8 again.
8A, 8B, 8C, 8D. Sean, can I ask a question about the inmate health care? So on these budgets, we are assuming in both, I imagine, that the health care millage will be on the ballot and will be approved again, and that we will have the $5+ million to pay for the inmate health care using those funds. Is that right? So if that were, either not placed on the ballot or put on the ballot and defeated, we would then have a $5 million decision to make, an expense that would have to fall potentially to the general fund. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Schmidt.
Also, was that the millage they were talking about possibly reducing what was levied as well? So that would also impact how much could be spent out of that fund.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shoemaker.
Page 8, pressure points again. Request forthcoming to keep grant positions. Now, on this number you gave us at the bottom, is this 4.557 million above what you figured for increases for our wages already for, our annual increase we gave the employees and, our other increases?
Yes, this would be added to the fiscal year 27 budget would be the almost $6 million.
That in this.
And that includes what the current wages are for these.
Both those numbers, though, are in the sheet with, and then without.
Yes.
4.5 is not
Does not
included in both,
No, I understand it.
but the
No,
wage increases,
I guess I should-
average of wage
yes,
increases over a number of
is in,
years.
is in both,
both.
but
That's why you see the dollar
Yes.
amount per year, because the only difference in that with requests one is these positions. And that's why you see the dollar amount go up each year, because it's projecting that increase for each of those positions. Mhm.
just one quick question on the foreclosure lawsuit process. I know that's traveling through all the stuff. I know we had a meeting. It was so long ago. Holy cow. Do we have the funds set aside if we were to have to pay? I thought we did.
Yes.
A while back we did. But
They have funds set aside within that delinquent tax revolving fund to settle those.
are those lawsuits any closer to state or fed?
The last I knew, we're not really waiting on the feds. Well, it's sort of. The plaintiffs are trying to back out of the settlement agreement that we agreed to months ago, based on waiting to see what the U.S. Supreme Court is going to do. And they have to issue a decision, I think, by the end of this month. That's when their term ends. So I haven't gotten an update from our attorney, other than the plaintiffs are trying to back. We're kind of in a holding pattern right now.
There's some settlements discussed at one point.
There was a settlement.
I thought we
agreed to it.
participated.
Everyone agreed to it, and like I said, I've been told that the plaintiffs' attorneys are trying to back out of it now, waiting to see if they can get a better deal from a U.S. Supreme Court ruling. So that's where we're at.
You could just keep us updated on that once in a while, maybe every 6 months, because it's been a while we discussed it.
We'll have an answer by the end of this month. The Supreme Court's going to decide this month.
Right, and you might not remember, but we had this the closed session back months ago, and I think the payments were supposed to start this May. And again, that hasn't happened because
Pong.
yeah, Pong.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone.
And that number is not significant because those properties that we foreclose on are within that time period.
Commissioner Brown?
So, Melissa, I know the assessors are coming for a conference, right? Equalization directors. Is something on the agenda, on their agenda? Do you know the agenda?
Microphone.
We have education scheduled for continuing education. So we have, they're going to be talking a lot about the revitalization of that happened in the city of Flint and Stacey is the assessor for city of Flint, and she was doing a lot of education.
I just didn't know if any of the current legislation was going to be addressed during your
That will
conference.
we'll be having a lot of addressing on that on Friday, at my meeting on Friday. And then on June 15th, I'll have my Michigan Assessors Association meeting. I'm on the board there. And we'll be getting an update then. So I can start, and that's what I was going to talk to Josh too, is start, if I get those updates from the, at our MAA meetings, because she actually provides us with an update of everything. I could start including those ones that are involving with property taxes in my monthly reports.
Helpful.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm going to, based on these projections, I'm going to be a dream crusher too. We're not going to be able to do these forthcoming requests. I just don't see how we can do it. Because we have to balance the budget. And, you know, there are some things that are nice to have. There are some things that are mandated that we have. And so I know that based on the impending threat of the property tax reform, I know that ARPA has sunsetted. I know that, you know, we have a lot of other moving parts to this budget. We're going to have to make some tough decisions and say no to some things, and this is one of them. These are some of them.
Commissioner Cousineau.
Yeah, just to feed off on both Brown and Shoemaker, we're going to have to make some very big decisions. I know how I'm going to vote already. I just wanted to encourage the four of us that are here to look at it close so that when we get to that point, we're prepared to do whatever it takes. I'm glad Shoemaker brought up the medical examiner issue, because I've always been concerned about that, and I really, I've never been comfortable with that system and how it's worked over there, and what we're charging and how it's operated, you know, whether he needs more personnel, and if he does, it needs to be reflected in what he's charging to those other counties, because I just, I hate saying this, but I just have a gut feeling that we're being taken advantage of a little bit on some of those. And just to get the business, you know, we're basically subsidizing those other counties. That's just my general feeling. So I really want us to take a closer look at that issue. So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
We have additional discussion. Mr. Shoemaker.
How much unspent ARPA do we have left?
At the end of May, we had about $4 million with everything that's unspent.
You're asking how much we have to reprogram? It's going to be about 1.1, 1.2. We're going to bring a proposal to you.
I think to the next.
Should have said unassigned.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
No, it's my apologies. My apologies. It is
Yes.
816.
No, that's okay.
So
Yes, that should be at the next committee.
So do we have an idea of what we'd like?
I mean, just a preview, we're expected to recommend that we further invest in the Kearsley Creek Interceptor project. There's limitations on what we can invest in. We can't go out and do a new project. It's got to be something that we already had under contract, and that's one of those. It takes into consideration kind of the big picture and the goal that the commissioners had when we started the ARPA, which was how do we invest in infrastructure that's going to give us a long term, and how do we do that to maximize those dollars, right? To spread those dollars.
Let's talk before we bring it to the, just before we bring it to the board, so we're not in a board meeting for 50 minutes just discussing this, because it's a
Yeah.
topic. We could have a conversation well before, maybe a workshop, or even just a couple of us here.
Well, it'll be next week, so we can.
Oh,
is the recommendation
prepare me for a longer meeting.
But we can set up a meeting with Derek, and we can talk about what projects that we have on the books that would be eligible to spend these dollars on. Because that's what it boils down to, is eligibility.
It's where we had to start with.
And that's a very narrow window now.
County did a nice job as a whole. Our municipalities that partnered with us and everything else like that. I was just thinking to see if, once again, we had some municipalities that fit into what our economic plan is.
Yeah, so remember that Kearsley Creek goes over multiple units, right? It goes from Atlas, Grand Blanc, Davison Township, and Genesee Township. Don't quote me on that. But again, it's eligibility, and that's a very narrow window.
Existing project.
Yeah. The window's very narrow now.
So thank you to our Director of Administration and our Chief Financial Officer for your professionalism and collaboration in putting this together. It was a joint effort. And it wasn't just me that requested it. Gary or Commissioner Getzinger, I try to meet every Wednesday, usually at lunch or sometimes a little bit later. And this was one of the ideas that we had come up with in advance of the budget season. Saying that, would you, before we leave the meeting, tell us, so department heads are working on their budgets right now, I heard you say that. Could you just go over for us and the public the budget hearings, the dates, and are they, everyone's gotten a calendar invite, I take it?
Yes. I am going to also pass out lists of when those are at the next Finance Committee meeting as well.
Okay.
So those meetings will be on July 1st and July 15th. You should have all received invitations. There's also a Teams option for anybody who cannot make it in person. And I will be recording those in case you want to have access to those later if you can't join at that particular time. So yes, departments have until Friday to look at their budget. I expect that the requests will be higher than what I just provided you because they've never requested less. And then from there, my team goes through and reviews and sends our questions to the departments to prepare for those budget meetings so that we can have an active conversation on, if we need to cut something or if they want to ask you to add something. We have those conversations at those two meetings in July. and then we incorporate any changes before we adopt in either August. Typically, the last couple of years we've tried to do August. I think last year it did end up going to the meeting in September, but just to make sure we're prepared before October 1st.
Thank you, and thanks to everyone for being here tonight. It's not easy on a beautiful June summer evening to give up your time, so I'm grateful for it, and we'll see each other next week. Thank you.